What's dear to our hearts? Homeopathy. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I see the little heart. Thank you for your heart. And I'm going to take a sip of my milk because it's so appropriate for tonight's class. I love milk. I would drink it all the time, but for the fact that when I was doing that over the years, I started to gain a good amount of weight. I had to stop. So I certainly have my dairy. I have tons of butter every day, and I have my yogurt for breakfast in the morning, but I don't normally imbibe a full glass of milk. But tonight, it's going to be appropriate because tonight we're going to be going through our Materia Medica, and maybe some of you know what I'm talking about by incorporating this into the visual tonight. We're going to be using my Materia Medica, but let's put it in the camera the proper way. And we're going in alphabetical order. We're still in the A's. And we're going to go over a remedy that obviously I'm not the only one who's covered this. It's also in my Materia Medica that I've kept through the years. And I'm going to show you this. It's pretty beat up. Look at this poor thing. It's Roger Morrison's. I can barely read it. I should know the author's name. I can barely read it because it's been worn away. And this is I'll be rebinding this very soon for the third time. And so this is my Roger Morrison's Materia Medica. And I want you to be able to see it. And this is on the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight. But see all that writing? Those are all my notes that I've gathered through the years. I'm going to show you some other pages too, if you're at all interested. When I took classes in Toronto and New York and Ohio and New Jersey, I would keep notes in this book. And then I used that for when I was taking notes from my classes, but also I've used it clinically speaking. When I find that a medicine acts well, and I'm going to tell you an interesting story in a couple of classes or a couple Mondays from now about Arnica montana. If I don't remember to tell you this story, make sure you remind me, because I've got a pretty interesting story to tell about a remedy that Arnica and how it was used differently and how I've used it ever since for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about Aeschylus. I think you can see that there, Aeschylus, right there. It's called fool's parsley in layman's terms, and it's an incredible medicine. It's spelled A-E-T-H-U-S-A, Athusa. The E is silent, Athusa. Synapium is the second word, Athusa synapium, but it's unnecessary that you use the second word, particularly in this medicine, because there's only one, generally speaking, there's only one Athusa. Now, there may be others, but they're probably more remote. And so for our purposes, plain old Athusa will work. And so what I write in my Materia Medica about is that the keynote is milk intolerance. Now, it's kind of interesting that I find that there's a lot of confusion around this medicine, and I discuss it pretty thoroughly in a couple of my more intense classes. I discuss it in Good Gut, Bad Gut. I discuss it in Allergic, and I'm pretty sure I discuss it in Mindful Homeopathy, which is about psychological problems and mental problems. And one of the problems is that people say, well, I'm allergic to wheat, I'm allergic to pollen, I'm allergic to cats and dogs, and I'm allergic to milk. I think I'll take Athusa because milk is one of them. And then I'll try to take a remedy that's for all the rest of them as well. That's generally not the way we do it. If someone has a problem with milk, a milk intolerance, now, and it can show, parenthetically, it can present with gut issues, bloating, I'm trying to think of some of the other, colic, diarrhea, vomiting, weakness, all of that. But it can also present as something that seems completely irrelevant to digestion, such as eczema. And so we don't use this medicine unless it is clearly, pretty clearly, a milk intolerance. So I've got my milk here, And I took a sip of it. I'm going to take another sip so we can gather more folks in. Meanwhile, oh, I see a couple people from Western New York and South Carolina. It's so nice to see that. And Yoo-hoo, Katie, nice to see you. And so Athusa is a great medicine for children and for babies. You would think that a baby could tolerate milk, wouldn't you? Particularly mother's milk. And normally we don't think that mother's milk is intolerable. But when we do, unfortunately, I think we've gotten too much information. And a lot of times, if a baby nurses and is sick afterwards, or just is sick with eczema and or colic, etc., and it's kind of clear that we've tried to figure out what else it could be, and it does seem to be the milk, the mother's milk. Then instead of thinking, oh my gosh, my milk is bad, oh my gosh, I must be toxic, I must be releasing toxins, it must be the drug that I took, forget all of that. It's as simple as if the child is intolerant to milk, this is the remedy. Athusa 200C is the way we normally use it. It's also used in a 6, but frequently I use it in a 200C, often twice daily. In certain circumstances, it might be every other day. Now, I know you want to know what those circumstances are, don't you? If someone is very sick, if it's a very sick child, for example, and it's extremely obvious that it's the milk. And there are many ways of knowing this. Testing is one of them, but there are many ways of knowing. Then we think, we got to get this in the baby right away, and we usually use it twice daily. When we're not so sure, we might use it every other day. When might we also use it every other day? Well, I'll give you the second keynote for Athusa, which is really powerful. It is for children who are behind in their milestones. Autistic children, children who have learning disabilities, children who have their milestones are on time for their intellect, but they're not walking yet, and they're 2 years old. Their walking ability is very good, yet their ability to speak is not there. Or they can speak, but they refuse to speak. Whenever we see a milestone that's off, it doesn't have to be all milestones. Don't assume that anytime we see something that's off, and this is so in homeopathy, that it has to be completely off. No, it can be partially off. If the child is behind in their milestones, or one milestone that's significant enough, or 2 milestones, then this is a remedy we consider. And if we know the child has intolerance to dairy or mother's milk, this is often the medicine. Now, what happens if the person who has the milk intolerance, the dairy intolerance, is an adult? Do we have to have missing milestones? No, because I'm not telling you that both those 2 keynotes must be there. It's just that when they are there, it builds your argument more fully. So if it's an adult and they don't have milestones that are missing, although it can happen, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But if it's an adult and they have no milestones that are missing, they're perfectly fine mentally, socially, physically, psychologically, yet they simply cannot tolerate milk and its byproducts. Now, I'm not talking about butter so much. I am talking more about milk, although it can be derivatives of milk, and the ones that are the closest would be kefir, yogurt, cream. Not so much butter, not cheese, not so much cheese. Things change when we isolate the fats. So for an adult, we can use it as well, Athusa 200, either once a day or once every other day. Now, what about an adult who has missing milestones? We don't call them milestones for adults. Generally, we look at them as disabilities. It's an adult who can't read or doesn't read well or who's socially awkward. Now, I'm not talking about a little bit. And we're not splitting hairs here. We're not looking for extreme details. I'm talking about something that most people would note about this particular person. Then we can also consider a thusa. And if we find that there's a person who is behind socially as an adult or a teenager or whatever, any age, and they have the milk intolerance, and I'm emphasizing this because I want you to understand that you can use it for one of these keynotes only, but boy, if you've got two, you've got something there. You're really moving in the right direction. So that's a thusa. It's that simple. It's a beautiful medicine. For years, I never thought to use it. It wasn't until I started working with the Banerjees that I became comfortable using it. And I've seen tremendous results. Now, how long does it take? Most people say, well, how long does it take to get rid of a milk intolerance or milestones changing? Well, it depends on the person, depends on the person. But what we often see is over an 8-week period of time, we see something. We see some movement forward. Oh, the child is now nursing and not getting as sick. The child's allergies are not as severe. The child's eczema is not as red. The child is not cramping as much. It doesn't mean we can't use other medicines along with it, but we're looking for, at least if we're going to assume that at least if we want to declare that a thusa is correct, at least in this situation, we must see a little movement forward over 8 weeks. Meanwhile, parents often report, you know what? He wasn't able to walk last time, and he's starting to take steps. It's only been 4 weeks ago that was going on. A lot of times, parents often say to me, I think my child's just grown up. And of course the child is grown up because they've been allowed to grow up. They've been given that little stimulus of homeopathy. And I often hear that because we often see that now the child is no longer taking that medicine and still needs it. It's not that we need it forever, but we might still need it over, say, 3 months later. The family goes on a vacation. They forget to bring the thusa, and the child starts scratching again from the eczema, or gets diarrhea, or gets gut issues, or they stop speaking as well. Their vocabulary diminishes again, and the parent says, well, wait a minute. Was the child simply growing up, or was it the medicine that was stimulating his ability to do so? Which is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best parts of homeopathy. It's so subtle that it's easy to miss. And so you have to be observant. And in fact, I encourage, that's one of the main benefits of homeopathy, is that it encourages mothers and parents and grandparents to become observant. Not asking a lot of questions. You don't want to ask a lot of questions of your child or even your husband or your friend. Just observe. A lot of times people tell me, what I used to say years ago, I used to ask someone, are you thirsty, in my family, to find out whether or not they needed a specific medicine, or are you hungry? And they would say, no, I'm not thirsty. No, I don't really have much thirst. Let's see, am I hungry? No, I guess I'm hungry, but I'm not thirsty. So they're not experiencing thirst, perhaps, but you're observing thirst. Otherwise, they wouldn't be drinking like they are. And you can do the same for food, for eating. Do you eat a lot? Do you have a big appetite? No, I don't have a big appetite. And they keep eating and eating and eating. And there's your observational skills building. And you don't ever say to them, see what you just said, you're not telling me the truth. No. Because we humans often don't know what we're experiencing. Sometimes we do, and then we take that verbatim from them. This is very painful. You got to believe them. If it's very painful, it's very painful. You've got to believe that. But if you're observing something and you're wondering whether or not that person is just lazy in their reading, this child, or they can't read, if you observe long enough, you'll know which one it is, whether it's laziness, lack of motivation, or simply not able to read. And so then that will help you differentiate. So I want to urge you to not just use this particular podcast for your education. Last week, I spoke about the flu. I very strongly urge you to go back to that and watch it again or listen to it again so that you really get this. This is what people tell me all the time. I took your good gut, bad gut course, and I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't helping my family. So I took it again. I mean, they own it once. You only pay for it once. So they went over it again, second time. It helped me a little bit more, but it wasn't. I had one woman tell me it wasn't till the 9th time that I went through that course that I fully understood and I was able to use these medicines correctly for my family. And from that time forward, I got it. Why would it take 9 times? Because, folks, I'm getting a very complex, very, very complex medicine that has been around for hundreds of years and distilling it down to make it incredibly easy. And by doing so, there are nuances that you do need to understand. You have to understand what you're looking for, what remedy, what potency, what frequency, when to stop, and what you are looking for. And that will give you the information you need to be able to cure your family yourself. And then you can pass on the torch. So with that, to all of you, good night, everyone. See you next Monday.